As you get older, sometimes you feel as though it's important for you to pause and take stock of things that you think you have learned through your life about yourself, about other people, even basic things about the way the world works, the way the physical world works, the way the social world works. And often what you discover is that, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the things you think that you knew actually have been overturned by other items of knowledge that you've acquired. Perhaps others survive a little better. Descartes really begins the project of what we'll call Descartes' Doubts. His radical project of doubt in the Meditations begins with that simple self-inventory that all thinking people should at some point in their lives engage in. He asks himself, do I really know all of the things that I thought I knew? Here's what he says. He begins the first meditation this way. Some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole edifice that I had subsequently based on them. I realized that it was necessary, once in the course of my life, to demolish everything completely and start again right from the foundations, if I wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. Descartes' goal in the Meditations, his self-described goal, is to do this inventory of his own beliefs and to find, if he can, a stable foundation for, as he puts it, all of the sciences. I mean, keep in mind historically that at the time, this is the very early stages of revolutions in science, in mathematics, and to some degree in philosophy as well. This is right at the beginning of the Enlightenment. And Descartes is very much seeing these changes take place around him and thinking, boy, if we're going to overturn centuries of received understanding about the world, we had better make sure that we put it all on firm foundation so that it doesn't dissolve beneath us like a house built on weak foundations. He thinks then, I will start with myself, as any sort of relatively humble person should. I'll start with myself and see if there's anything of mine that I believe that is certain. His goal in finding this stable foundation for human knowledge, stability is, of course, a metaphor. Beliefs aren't either stable or unstable. Stability is a feature of a physical object. So what is it a metaphor for? At the beginning of the second meditation, which we'll talk about later, he gives us a hint. He says this: Archimedes used to demand just one firm and immovable point in order to shift the entire earth. So I too can hope for great things if I manage to find just one thing, however slight, that is certain and unshakable. So it's clear that for Descartes, when he says he wants to find a stable foundation for his knowledge and all of human knowledge, he's looking for something that is certain or indubitable, incapable of being doubted. Actually sort of simplify things for me. He says this: to accomplish this, that is to call into doubt his beliefs with the goal of finding some stable, firm foundation, it will not be necessary for me to show that all my opinions are false, which is something I could perhaps never manage. Reason now leads me to think that I should hold back assent from opinions which are not completely certain and indubitable just as carefully as I do from those which are patently false. So, for the purpose of rejecting all of my opinions, it will be enough if I find in each of them at least some reason for doubt. So Descartes here notices there's a first practical problem, which is, I can't go through and disprove each of my beliefs, show that each of them is false. That would be impossible. All I really need to do is see whether I can doubt each of them. If I can, then I can pretend as if I've successfully disproved them. And this will make it more this will make it easier for me to separate out the beliefs that are not sufficiently stable from, ideally, the one that is. So stability for him means certainty or indubitability, and the method he's going to employ is not the method of disproving his beliefs, but rather calling each of them into doubt. And then if he can doubt them, set them aside. This is the method of doubt. The goal is find something that's indubitable, and the method is doubt everything. There's a second practical problem, though, And this second practical problem is that there seem to be an infinite number of beliefs. So the first practical problem was I can't really positively disprove all my beliefs. And the second practical problem is I have so many beliefs. I mean, here, for example, in my case, I believe that the number 1 exists. I believe that the number 2 exists. I believe that the number 3 exists, and so on. I could keep going, Mr. B style, forever until I died. Descartes does not have that kind of time. So instead, he notices, human belief has a certain sort of structure or edifice. Some beliefs that we hold are based on others. Some beliefs assume other beliefs. So for example, my belief that I'm looking at a camera right now assumes or rests on the assumption that my perceptual faculties, my vision, is reliable. If I could call into doubt the assumption that my perceptual faculties are generally reliable, I would thereby have called into doubt the proposition that I'm seeing a camera right now, because the belief that there's a camera is based on the assumption of the reliability of my faculties. So Descartes notices that his own beliefs have this sort of structure, and he thinks that all human beliefs are structured in this way. He says this, and to do this, I will not need to run through them all individually, which would be an endless task. Once the foundations of a building are undermined, anything built on them collapses of its own accord. So I will go straight for the basic principles on which all my former beliefs rested. There's a common distinction that Descartes accepts between sensory beliefs, or what are sometimes called a posteriori beliefs. These are beliefs that are based upon and depend for their justification on the senses or sense experience, including touch and vision and taste and smell and hearing. So for example, my belief that I'm looking at a camera, your belief that you're looking at a laptop, your belief that you're on campus right now, these kinds of beliefs are based primarily on the senses. On the other hand, there are a priori beliefs. This is a little controversial, but Descartes definitely thinks that there is such a category. A priori beliefs are broadly beliefs that do not depend for their justification on the senses. These are beliefs that are independent of sense experience. Where do they get their justification, or where do they come from? The common answer that Descartes accepts is that they come from reason. There's a separate faculty that we have of reason that's distinct from our senses that produces a priori beliefs. And some examples, allegedly, of a priori beliefs include mathematical truths like 2 and 2 are 4. These include basic truths of logic, like modus ponens is a valid argument form. These include the basic semantic beliefs, or basic beliefs that are justified by semantic considerations, like my belief that bachelors are unmarried is justified just by my grasp of the definition of the concepts or words bachelor and being unmarried. Those are examples of the a priori. Descartes thinks that, broadly speaking, this is the structure that our beliefs have. At the top, these are the most dependent beliefs. We have sensory beliefs about what's right in front of us and what's far away. These sensory beliefs all rest on an assumption, and that assumption is that my senses are generally reliable. Down below the sensory, we have more basic, firmer assumptions that are coming to us from reason. Assumptions about the nature of mathematical truths. He thinks that very general physical facts fall into this category. And these all bottom out at the assumption that my reason is trustworthy or reliable. And Descartes' idea is, well, I can target all of my sensory beliefs if I target for doubt my belief or my assumption that my senses are reliable. Likewise, if I can target for doubt my assumption that my reason is reliable, I then will know I've succeeded in doubting each of the individual beliefs in this category, and I don't have to go through them one by one. So that is, in a lot of ways, one of the genius moves that Descartes makes in Meditation 1. How in the world, though, can he possibly doubt that his senses are reliable? Well, this he he stumbles upon sort of in free association. He is also asking, how can I doubt that I'm sitting here by a fire? It just seems obvious. Look, there it is. And he then says this, a brilliant piece of reasoning. He realizes it. As if I were not a man who sleeps at night and regularly has all the same experiences while asleep as madmen do while awake. Indeed, sometimes even more improbable ones. How often, asleep at night, am I convinced of just such familiar events that I am here in my dressing gown sitting by the fire when in fact I am lying undressed in my bed. This is the dream hypothesis. The dream hypothesis is the hypothesis that all of your, put it in your own case, all of your sensory experiences, maybe your visual experiences coming from what seemed to be your laptop, the experiences maybe you have of sounds or smells, all of those are in fact products of a very vivid dream. The hypothesis is you are right now asleep in your bed having a very vivid dream of watching a lecture video about Descartes. That's the hypothesis. The question for you to consider is whether you have any evidence that the dream hypothesis is false. What evidence could you possibly provide? I mean, presumably it would be something like, well, it doesn't feel like a dream. I mean, here are my hands. Here I seem to be wearing a blue collared shirt, which I never wear to bed. I seem to be standing up, and I don't sleep while I'm standing up. I don't seem to be in my bedroom. Very quickly, though, Descartes notices, yeah, there are these sort of tests or bits of evidence that we can try to apply, but they're not very reliable, are they? He says this, yet at the moment, my eyes are certainly wide awake when I look at this piece of paper. So he's trying this sort of test. He's like, well, can I disprove the dream hypothesis? It doesn't seem like I'm dreaming. My eyes feel awake. I shake my head, and it is not asleep. As I stretch out and feel my hand, I do so deliberately. He seems to be engaging his will and know what I'm doing. It all seems quite clear. All of this would not happen with such distinctness to someone asleep, or at least so he thinks. Then he realizes, indeed, as if I did not remember other occasions when I've been tricked by exactly similar thoughts while asleep. As I think about this more carefully, I see plainly that there are never any sure signs by means of which being awake can be distinguished from being asleep. The result is that I begin to feel dazed. This very feeling only reinforces the notion that I may be asleep. So what has happened here is that Descartes has realized, there have been times in the past when I've had such a vivid dream that it has seemed to me while in the dream that I'm not dreaming. Maybe I've even raised the possibility, am I dreaming? In the dream. And I've done things like shake my head, or what I thought was shaking my head. And then I've touched deliberately what I thought were my arms. And it felt to me in the moment just as if I were not asleep. But of course, I was wrong. Those were all dream experiences. And his idea is that any test you can come up with to distinguish dream experiences from waking experiences is the sort of test that could go wrong, namely in a dream. You could dream that you're correctly applying that test. You could dream, for example, that, I'm going to pinch myself and feel a bit of pain and think to yourself, well, then I'm not dreaming. And then a second later, you wake up and realize, oh, I was dreaming. I invite you to consider whether there are any tests you can come up with that, unlike Descartes, you think can reliably show that you're not dreaming. And the test is going to be, the test for whether your test works. Remember, his goal is just to call into doubt whether or not you are awake, or call into doubt the possibility that that the dream hypothesis might be true. The question, therefore, is, am I absolutely certain? Or could it be that this test I've come up with seems to be reliable when in fact I'm simply dreaming that this is a reliable test? Could that be? If so, then I'm now doubting. And that's really all Descartes needs. I'm now doubting all of my sensory experiences because I'm doubting the reliability of my senses. Descartes has effectively called into doubt all of the very specific sensory beliefs that he holds. The dream hypothesis, therefore, calls into doubt the reliability of his senses and all of his beliefs about visible objects before him and their properties. In other words, he's now doubting whether or not, perhaps, he is simply asleep in his bed having a very vivid dream as if he's writing the meditations when he's not. There are, though, many beliefs that he has not called into doubt by drawing his attention to the fact that he can't be sure that he's not dreaming. And those include very general physical facts, very general physical truths like the laws of nature, facts about geometry, that there are some shapes, some colors, basic arithmetical facts like 2 and 2 are 4, the laws of logic, and also, importantly, he hasn't doubted that he has a body of some kind. I mean, if he is in fact asleep, he's got to have a body that's a sleeping body producing the dream. And if he's asleep, he has to, at the very least, be embedded in some sort of physical world in which the dream is occurring, or in which the dream state is occurring. So these beliefs, which are generally a priori beliefs, perhaps with some very general sensory beliefs sprinkled in, are the beliefs that have survived his project of doubt so far, about halfway through the meditations. And remember, his goal is to try to test each belief for its dubitability, and if it's able to be doubted, to cast it aside as if it were false. So he now needs to go through and figure out how, if at all, he can call into doubt things like 2 and 2 being 4, things like there is any kind of external world outside my mind at all, or there is any kind of physical properties to the external world, space and extension. How in the world can he do this? The dream hypothesis won't do the trick. And he begins to remember, of course, he also, as he puts it, embedded in my mind is the idea of an all-powerful God. Now, the idea of omnipotence, as we've discussed, means the ability to do anything. Descartes actually has a relatively unlimited conception of omnipotence, closer to the idea that God can do even the logically impossible, which we said is a sort of unorthodox view about omnipotence. But regardless of whether you follow Descartes in that conception of omnipotence, the idea is, well, couldn't it be that God is making it seem to me as though I have a body when I don't? Couldn't it be that God is making it seem to me, even perhaps, that 2 and 2 are 4 when 2 and 2 are not 4? And there you can see the role of the unlimited conception of omnipotence there. Descartes quickly rejects this as a mechanism for doubt, though. In other words, he has a response to it that means he hasn't actually doubted whether 2 and 2 are 4, whether he has a body. And the problem is that in addition to being all-powerful, his conception of God is a perfectly good being. And he realizes, well, a perfectly good being would not systematically deceive me into believing that there's a world outside my mind when there's not. That would be a deeply malicious thing for a being to do. He therefore turns away from the use of God as his mechanism of doubt and realizes that really what was important about the God hypothesis for purposes of doubt is the fact that it's all-powerful. So he thinks, well, why don't I conceive instead of God of a being that has divine powers, that is all-powerful, but that is not perfectly good and that's willing to deceive me? Maybe that being is bringing it about that I think 2 and 2 are 4 when they're not, or bringing it about that I think I have a body when I don't. He says this, I will therefore suppose, not that God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely delusions of dreams, which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. I shall consider myself as not having hands or eyes or flesh or blood or senses, but as falsely believing I have all these things. So this is the most sweeping of Descartes' skeptical hypotheses. And these skeptical hypotheses are alternative explanations of where seemings come from, both perceptual seemings and rational seemings. explanations of why it seems to Descartes as though he's sitting by a fire that are that don't invoke the fact that there is a fire before him. An explanation of why it seems to him that 2 and 2 is 4 that doesn't invoke the fact that 2 and 2 is 4. And the evil demon hypothesis is this: I'm currently being systematically deceived, that is, deceived in all respects possible, by an omnipotent evil demon. It's important that the deception here is systematic. And what that means is that the evil demon is making it seem to Descartes as though he's sitting by a fire when he's not. He's also making it seem to Descartes that he has a body when Descartes does not have a body. He's in fact a sort of free-floating soul, a disembodied being who is being pumped full of experiences as though he's holding up his hands, or what seem to be his hands, and there are physical hands attached to him, when there are no physical hands attached to him because there are no hands at all. The evil demon is making it seem to him that there's other people. There are no other people. The evil demon is even making it seem to him that 2 and 2 are 4 when 2 and 2 are in fact 5. The question then is, what is your evidence that you're not being deceived by this all-powerful, malicious demon in all respects? And you may have some evidence. I mean, I think Descartes is willing to say, look, the fact that it doesn't seem to you right now as if you are being deceived by the demon is some evidence. It counts for something. But what's important for his project is that evidence doesn't logically guarantee that you're not being deceived by an evil demon. In other words, it doesn't definitively or with certainty rule out that hypothesis. After all, your experiences and all of your thoughts, down to the last detail, would be exactly the same as they are now, wouldn't they? If, in fact, there was an evil demon deceiving you. And for that reason, although you may have evidence, that evidence is not certain. As a result, you cannot be absolutely certain that the evil demon hypothesis is false. And if you can't be absolutely certain that the evil demon hypothesis is false, nor can you be absolutely certain that you have a body, nor can you be absolutely certain that 2 and 2 are 4, nor can you be certain that there are such things as colors and shapes and so on. So what the evil demon hypothesis does is call into doubt not just particular beliefs about which physical objects there are outside of your mind at the moment, but just about everything else. We have now followed Descartes through this meditation, and we have left off at this point with little to nothing left that we haven't doubted. And recall that at the beginning of the first meditation, Descartes' announced goal was to find some piece of knowledge that couldn't be doubted. To the extent that it seems as though we are left with nothing, it seems like Descartes' announced goal is a failure. He has, rather than finding certainty, if anything, he has shown that nothing is certain. And this is where he picks up at the beginning of the second meditation.